Hey, welcome back, podcast friends. Now, before I get started, I just want to make a quick announcement. We are doing a 4-week freeze the scale challenge from the Monday before Thanksgiving to the Monday the week before Christmas. This freeze the scale challenge takes place right inside our supportive Facebook group, where the goal is to avoid gaining weight through the holidays while truly enjoying the time with friends and family. We'll focus on making mindful choices and eating more whole foods, but members can still enjoy the favorite holiday treats in moderation, guilt-free. So together, we'll celebrate every healthy choice and cheer each other on. This is about balance, not perfection. And did I mention this is totally free? So if you'd like to join us, just go to drstevehewlett.com or just click the link below the show notes for the Facebook group, and we'll see you there. This podcast is going to be about making sure that everybody understands that our body uses two different sources of energy. We can use glucose for our energy, and we can use fat for our energy. So as we go through this, I'm going to explain to you why when you use glucose for your energy, that is not natural. That's not the way God made us, and it's causing all kinds of organ damage in our body. When you use fat for your energy source, it's extremely healthy, and that is what's going to keep you healthy because you keep your insulin levels low. You're going to keep your inflammation low. You're going to keep your glucose levels low. And as anybody's following me knows that my 3 pillars of disease are high insulins, inflammation throughout your body, and high blood glucose. So you want to avoid all 3 of those. And if you avoid the glucose, then you're automatically going to avoid the high insulin as well. So you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And that's why I want to make sure that you understand this. So let's go through this. Glucose versus fat. Which one should we be using? And the thing is, you decide. You decide which one you're going to use. If you're going to use glucose, if you're going to use fat. And the whole thing comes through if you choose glucose, like most people have done for the last 40, 50 years because of our dietary guidelines. If you use glucose, you will make your insulin levels rise. When you make your insulin rise, it forces your body to store fat. When you use fat, it keeps your insulin levels low, and you burn the fat out of your fat cells for your energy source. So eating fat is not what makes you fat. Eating glucose is what makes you fat because it raises your insulin and it causes you to stuff fat in your fat cells. So that's the base. Now let's go through this. First, sources. How are we eating glucose? What's the source of glucose? First off, glucose is the basic building block of all carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are plant-based foods. So all plant-based foods are based off glucose. Now there's a difference. There are good plant-based foods like fruits and vegetables, and there are horrible plant-based foods like sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and flour, which is just ground seeds to make nothing but pure glucose. And that's what all the food companies put in their products is sugar, high fructose corn syrup, flour, seed oils, all the stuff that's addictive, all the stuff that is causing all kinds of inflammation and insulin levels and diabetes and organ damage from everywhere. The way you choose is when you eat man-made food that's full of nothing but sugar and flour and glucose, it makes your insulin levels high and you constantly store your fat. As far as the good sources of glucose, yeah, fruits and vegetables, they do have glucose. Okay, all plant-based foods have glucose. However, the poison is in the dose. When you eat man-made food, you are way overdoing the glucose that your body can't handle. Your body can't handle anywhere near that much glucose. However, when you use fruits and vegetables, the vegetables that grow above the ground have a lot less glucose in them than the ones that grow below the ground. Because the ones below the ground are like the roots. That's the nutrition for the plant. So a lot of it has starch in it. Starch are just long chains of glucose. So if you have trouble with high blood glucose, then you definitely, everybody needs to stay away from man-made products. But if you have trouble with high glucose, you might also want to stay away from the plants that grow below the ground until you can get this under control and you can start using your fat for your energy source. Okay, now let's compare that to fat. What's a good form of fat? Animal fat is awesome. Animal fat is perfectly fine for you. So that means like tallow, which is beef fat, lard, which is pig fat, butter, whole milk, that kind of Greek yogurt, all that kind of stuff is good. Fruit oils are still good. Avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil. Those are good sources because they don't have to be processed so much. The horrible ones are the seed oils and these vegetable oils. They are toxic for so many reasons. Besides crop dusting these seeds of vegetable with herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, insecticides, then they bring them in and they subject them to more chemicals inside this big chemical plant where they put them with petrochemical solvents, deodorizing agent, bleaching agents, and then they have to add even more to it. They have to go through and they have to add in the processed food artificial flavoring, artificial coloring, artificial sweeteners, just nothing but chemicals. So stay away from man-made product that's made with all these seed oils and vegetable oils. They are toxic. Now, as far as the energy, God never meant for us to use glucose for energy source. And it's obvious when you look at what we do. Okay. The energy source, when you use glucose for your energy source, it's like building a campfire and building the whole fire and keeping the fire going all night using kindling. That's what glucose does. Because glucose, you eat it, it gets in your system quick, and then all of a sudden your body is trying to get rid of it, and it gets rid of the glucose, and then it's down. So when it comes down, if you're not used to using fat for your energy source, you're going to get hungry and you're going to eat more of this glucose, more of these carbohydrates that you've been eating. Okay. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to fuel your entire fire all day long, throwing kindling on the fire versus the energy from your fat. Think of your fat like the big logs on a fire. So if you're sitting here and you're fueling your body with kindling, or you're throwing this kindling on the fire and you let it burn, go down, let it burn, go down, and then you throw a big log on the fire, it's not going to burn. It can't burn because you haven't got the system going yet. However, if you learn to use fat, these big logs, once you get that fire going and you throw these big logs, and now these big logs are burning, now you're using your fat for your energy source. And then all of a sudden, if you want to throw some kindling on there, go ahead. The kindling will go up, come back down, and then you'll burn those big logs again. That's how our fat's supposed to be used. We use our fat, our main fat out of our subcutaneous tissue, use that for our main source all day long. Then when we have a fight or flight situation, bam, we need energy quick. Then that's like throwing gas on the fire, throwing this kindling on the fire. All of a sudden, your body puts glucose in your system. You take care of whatever the stress is. Your glucose goes up, your insulin goes up. You take care of the stress, glucose comes back down, insulin comes back down, and then you're supposed to start using the fat out of your fat cells again. That's how we do it. And the way you choose is by what you put in your mouth. One thing that you choose, glucose, carbohydrates, makes your insulin go up and cause you to store fat. When you use fat for your energy source, it does not affect your insulin at all. It keeps it low, and so you can burn the fat out of your fat cells. I'll probably say that multiple times throughout this because I want you to understand. Now, as far as in your stomach, when you eat glucose only stays in your stomach for about 30 to 60 minutes. And then once it gets out in your intestines, it only stays about 1 to 2 hours. So when you're eating carbohydrates, especially man-made carbohydrates, please stop eating this stuff. But when you eat carbohydrates, okay, it doesn't stay in your stomach very long. It doesn't keep you feeling full. It gets in your intestines. It does not keep you feeling full there. It does not stimulate anything, all the things that our body has to keep us feeling full. Glucose does not stimulate those. So you're hungry all the time. So if it's in your stomach for the max of 60 minutes, in your intestines for the max of 2, that means 3 hours after you eat, you're probably going to be starving and you're going to grab for the same stuff that keeps your insulin high the entire time. That's what you don't want to do. Now, let's turn that over and look at the time in the stomach for protein and fat. When you eat protein and fat, it'll stay in the stomach for about 2 to 4 hours. And then after it gets out, it goes all the way down through your intestines, and it stays in your intestines for about another 4 to 24 hours. And as it goes through your intestines, it's stimulating these different hormones that make you feel full. One of them is cholecystokinin, and the other one's peptide Y. When fat and protein in your intestines stimulate those, that goes to the medial hypothalamus and tells your body, I'm not hungry, stop eating. Okay, so that's why you can go many hours to days without eating when you have a good, nutritious protein and fat, because you get your protein, you get your fat, you get your cholesterol, you get vitamins, you get your minerals, you get everything the body needs. Your body does not need glucose. Oh, by the way, your body doesn't need glucose. Our whole bloodstream only has 2 teaspoons of sugar in it. And we'll talk about We'll talk a little bit later about our storage, but our body does not need glucose. It can make all the glucose it needs from fat and from protein. We never, ever have to put a plant-based food in our mouth, and we will be perfectly fine. Okay. And again, this isn't about fruits and vegetables. There are concerns about those. There are phytotoxins and things like that, but that's for another thing. And I'm definitely not against fruits and vegetables, but depending on your health status, you might want to control your carbs. So that's the deal with our energy. Okay. Fight or flight energy versus our long-term energy. Now, remember also that storage. Okay. If we were supposed to use glucose for our energy source, then we would have a lot of stores of glucose on our body for all those times that we used to go without eating. Now we don't have those times anymore since there's food everywhere. For a lot of people, there are still people, obviously, who are starving around the world. But for us, the storage of glucose, all we have is in our liver. We have 10% of our liver is glucose storage. And that's like little glucose bricks called glycogen. So as I talk about glycogen, that's just glucose storage bricks. Okay. So in your liver, you only have 10% is glucose stores. And in your skeletal muscles, every single skeletal muscle has 1% of it is glucose stores or glycogen. Now, on your skeletal muscles, okay, the glycogen in your skeletal muscles is only good for that one skeletal muscle. So that glycogen doesn't go out for all the body's energy needs. So that means that just your glucose in your liver is your main source for energy when you use glucose for your energy source. And just so you know, in the liver, your glycogen, there's only about 100 grams of glucose, which is about 400 calories. And if you add all the glucose in all the muscle cells, it adds another 500 grams or about another 2,000 calories. And remember, in your bloodstream, there's only 2 teaspoons, so that doesn't add hardly anything at all. So if you take all the glucose out of your body, you only have all the storage and everything, you only have about 2,400 calories. That's enough energy to last you one full day sleeping the entire day. Just for your basic metabolic rate, you're going to go through about 2,400 calories. That alone should be obvious that glucose is not supposed to be used for energy. That's our fight or flight energy, because hopefully your stress isn't going to last longer than 24 hours. All our other energy should be coming from our fat cells. Now let's look at the storage of our fat cells. We have subcutaneous fat cells all over the outside of our body, just underneath the skin. And that's where we store our fat. And as we have fat cells all over our body, so we can store lots of fat. We're not supposed to, okay? We're not supposed to be storing all this fat. You're supposed to eat, store the fat, and then go a long time without eating, so you burn that fat back out. So you fill your fat cells, burn it, fill your fat cells, and burn it. But that's not what we do anymore, because we're using glucose for our energy source, and we're constantly putting it in our mouths. And remember, if you take all the glucose out of the body, all the glucose stores, you have about 2,400 calories is all you have. 1 pound of fat has 4,000 calories. Think about that. All your glucose stores, you come up about 2,400 calories. 1 pound of fat has 4,000 calories. That means if you have 10 pounds of extra fat on your body, just 10 pounds, you're talking about having another 40,000 calories. 40,000 calories on your body that you could be using for energy source. But instead, what we're doing is using glucose, which just makes our fat storage even more. And that's what's killing us. We've got to quit using glucose for our energy source. The other thing is metabolism. When you metabolize glucose into energy, into ATP, that's our energy source, the byproduct is CO2 and water, but you also get these reactive oxygen species or free radicals. And these free radicals float around your body, these reactive oxygen species, and they start causing damage all over your body. Okay. So as you're constantly burning glucose, you're constantly making these. When you burn fat, it's pretty clean. It's pretty much just CO2 and water. You'll get a little bit of free radicals, but nowhere near what you're going to get with the glucose. So metabolism is a lot better also. The other thing is all the cellular damage. These reactive oxygen species, what they do is they cause cellular damage. If you've ever heard the term oxidative stress, that's why it causes that. And this oxidative stress is part of how you end up having all the cardiovascular disease and everything else that happens when you eat glucose constantly over and over again. You're constantly making all these triglycerides, and that's what ends up leading to all the vascular damage, cardiovascular damage, brain damage, renal failure, liver damage, is because of eating glucose instead of fat for your energy source. The biggest thing, like I've already said, what is causing all our trouble is we eat this kind of stuff that makes our insulin go high and stay high. That is how you get insulin resistance. Pre-diabetes is not a level of 5.7 to 6.4. Pre-diabetes means that your insulin levels are high, but your glucose levels are low. Because when you first start off, when you're healthy, you're gonna eat glucose. Your blood glucose is gonna go up. Then your body's gonna secrete insulin, and that brings that glucose back down to normal. That's how it's supposed to happen. But as you continue to eat glucose, this man-made food, the sugar and flour and high fructose corn syrup and all this stuff, when you eat that all through the day, you find that it takes more and more and more insulin to keep the blood glucose low. So if you go into a doctor and he looks at your blood glucose and it's low, he's going to say you're fine, you're not diabetic or pre-diabetic. But what he's not doing is he's not checking your insulin level, because if your insulin level is high and your glucose is low, all that means is you are working on insulin resistance. This is pre-diabetes. Then once you fill up all your fat cells with as much fat as it can take, now your insulin can't put any more fat anywhere. It starts putting it around your organs, and now your glucose levels start going up, and that's when you have diabetes. So pre-diabetes is not an A1C level. Pre-diabetes is 10, 20, 30, 40 years while you kept eating glucose, kept your insulin high. It just so happened your insulin was able to take care of the glucose load for a while, but eventually it wears out on everybody. And that's where genetics comes in. How long does it go before it wears out and you end up with full-blown diabetes? So the whole key is keeping your insulin levels low. The whole thing to keeping your insulin levels low is quit eating glucose, because glucose is what makes your insulin go up. Protein makes your insulin levels go up a tiny bit, not very much. My thought, now I've got to find this out because I'm really not sure, but the reason why I think protein does, now I know some amino acids can be turned into insulin, but I really think that it's mainly meat, because remember I said every single skeletal muscle, 1% of it is glycogen, so that's glucose. So if you eat meat, then all the muscle, you're going to get whatever that little glycogen is that's in the meat too. So some people, when they eat meat, they're going to see a glucose rise, and that's why. But it's not that bad, and it's going to come right back down afterwards. But again, because you're going to have your insulin, your meat's going to be gone, and it's going to come back down. You're not going to be constantly eating the glucose over and over again like you do when you eat carbohydrates for your main energy source. That is what you need to actually really stop. And again, you never have to eat a carb. You never have to eat a plant-based food ever, and you'll be perfectly healthy. Okay. Now, I know there are some nutritious things about plants, and that's fine. That's for a whole different topic. I'm just saying, in the majority of us, this whole thing is keeping our insulin levels low. So now, what are some of the adverse effects you have when you eat glucose for your energy source? Just like we said, insulin resistance. Every time you eat glucose, and what happens, and the food companies know this, they manufactured this food to be this way, where it never fills you up. There's no nutrients in it at all. So when you eat it, your body's like, I still don't have the nutrients. Remember the nutrients your body needs: protein, needs fat, needs cholesterol, vitamins, and minerals. It needs those. So if you don't give it those, it's going to take it from its own body. And that's why it was like these GLP-1 agonists or anything else that makes it where you're just full. You just don't eat. Okay. That's what those do. You just don't eat. So your body needs energy. If you're not eating glucose or fat, then it's going to get the fat from your fat cells. And that's good. So you eat the fat out of your fat cells for energy, like you're supposed to. However, the other thing that happens when you don't eat is you don't eat protein, and your body needs protein. The basic building block is amino acids, and that's what makes up all our protein. If you don't eat protein because you're not eating, because you're taking a drug that makes it where you don't feel full, your body will get the amino acids from tearing down your muscles. So it's going to tear your muscles down, and it's going to use that for the amino acids because you're not giving it to them from what you're eating. That also means you're depleting your vitamins and your minerals as well because you're not eating. So the reason you lose weight when you're on these diets, these starvation diets, or on these medications that make you have starvation diets, when you do that, it's called autocannibalism. You're actually eating yourself from the inside out. Yes, you're losing weight, but the majority of it is muscle. So since you're losing muscle, you're losing fat, you have decreased vitamin and mineral intake because you're starving yourself. This is why these people look so gaunt, sick, and all the other things that all the adverse effects, all the lawsuits are happening because of all the bad things that people are getting with these medications. They're taking it because it makes them feel full. Okay. Yes, there are some GLP-1 receptors up in the brain, but you only need like a tenth of the dose that you're getting from the medicines. Okay, you only need about a tenth to keep you to stimulate GLP-1 receptors in the brain to keep you feeling full. And the only time you're going to microdose like that, and you're not going to be able to do that from the drug companies because they're trying to put 10 times more GLP-1 than you need. And that's a whole nother topic. But what you need to do is you can microdose it and that'll do it, but that's only for 1 to 2 months until you change your nutrition, because all of this has to do with nutrition. That's where you get your energy. That's where you get your protein. That's where you get your fat. That's where you get vitamins and you get your minerals. So if that's all you're doing is going on a starvation diet, what you need to be doing is eating fat and eating protein. Okay. When you eat fat and protein, remember, it stays in the stomach for 2 to 4 hours and then it stays in the intestines for up to another 24 hours. So it keeps you feeling full. And there's all kinds of reasons why it keeps you feeling full. So when you keep you feeling full and you're not eating all those carbohydrates, then you're burning the fat out of your fat cells, just like you were when you're starving. You're giving your body the protein so it doesn't have to break down your muscles to get the amino acids. And you're eating, so you're giving it, hopefully, depending on what you're eating, you're giving it vitamins and minerals. So you're nourishing the body, but you're changing the fuel source that you use for your energy from glucose over to fat. And all you have to do to change your energy from glucose to fat is quit eating glucose. Your body does not like glucose. It hates it. It will do everything it can to keep high glucose out of your blood. When you have high glucose in your blood, okay, glucose starts binding to all the proteins in your body and it makes them inactive. It damages all the proteins in your body. It's called glycation. That's where we have our A1C. Our A1C is from our red blood cells. It's a hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin is the protein that's on your red blood cells. When you have high blood glucose attaches to the protein, the hemoglobin in that red blood cell, and it won't let loose. Okay. The life of a blood cell is about 3 to 4 months. So as this red blood cell floats around your blood for 3 to 4 months, the higher your blood glucose goes, the more it starts putting glucose on this red blood cell, damaging it. And that's how they can measure that. And since the life of a red blood cell is 3 to 4 months, then they can manage that and that can assess how much glucose, how high your average glucose has been for the last 3 to 4 months. Now, the only reason I tell you that, because I know that was a side note, is because the reason glucose attaches to the red blood cell is called glycation. It does that to all the proteins. So when you have high blood glucose all the time, glucose is damaging all the proteins in your body. Your body is made out of protein. Anything you touch, your skin, your organs, your bones, your muscles, a lot of your hormones, everything is made out of protein. So when you keep your glucose levels high, you're glycating all these proteins, meaning you're causing all kinds of damage. So that's another reason why you want to keep your insulin levels low. So keep your glucose low. So as far as adverse effects, when you use glucose for your energy source, you raise your insulin, so you end up with insulin resistance, which is diabetes. Okay, full-blown insulin resistance. I mean, now you filled up all the fat cells you have. That's what insulin resistance is. You're slowly filling up all your fat cells. That's why it takes 10, 20, 30, 40 years until you get all your fat cells all filled up, depending on how many fat cells you have. Once all those fat cells are totally filled up, because that's what insulin resistant is, a full fat cell. You can't put any more of these triglycerides in there. You've eaten so much glucose, made so much triglycerides. Your insulin's trying to put all these triglycerides in the cell, but a cell can only hold so much, which is a lot, about 10 times its normal size. It can grow with these. But if you keep doing it, it gets so stuffed. Now it's called insulin resistant, even though there's nothing wrong with insulin. You know, insulin's doing what it's doing. There's nothing wrong with your cell. It's doing what it's doing. It's bringing all those triglycerides that you're making. It's bringing all that in. Nothing wrong with your pancreas. The problem is your fat cells are too full. Okay. So giving medications that make your insulin levels rise makes no sense, because all you're doing is stuffing more triglycerides into these already stuffed cells than it needs to be. So you're just kicking the can down the road and you're eventually still going to end up with diabetes, because the whole thing is you've got to quit eating glucose. It has nothing to do with medication, has nothing to do with anything. Quit eating glucose and you will lose that weight. When you use glucose for your adverse effects, like I said, insulin resistance or diabetes, obviously obesity, okay, because that's what insulin does. It tells your liver to turn all the excess glucose, and any glucose you eat is excess glucose. Your insulin tells your liver to turn all that excess glucose into triglycerides, and then insulin tells your fat cells to store those triglycerides inside there. So if you keep your glucose levels down, you're going to keep your insulin levels down, and you won't be telling your body to make triglycerides, and you'll be using the fat out of your fat cells, so you'll be losing weight. However, when you stuff all your fat cells, after you've stuffed all your fat cells with triglycerides, all through your body doesn't have anywhere else to put these triglycerides. So what it does is start storing around your organs, and that's when you get fatty liver disease. You get liver failure, pancreatic failure, heart failure, kidney failure, brain failure. It damages every single organ in your body because now your glucose levels are high, which means your insulin levels are high. And because you're eating glucose all the time, chances are that means you're eating this man-made food, which means now your inflammation is extremely high also because of all the chemicals that's in this man-made food. And you have 100% choice over that from what you put in your mouth. So when you use glucose, you get insulin resistance, diabetes, you get obesity, you get organ damage from everything. If you want to know how bad insulin is, high insulin's good when you just use it for fight or flight situations. You are never, ever supposed to be secreting insulin all the time. And there's a great book called Why We Get Sick by Dr. Ben Bikman. I highly recommend you looking at that because it's a book that talks, his whole life has been in a labs and also teaching. He's a teacher at BYU, Brigham Young University in Utah. He teaches there, but his whole thing is just looking at how insulin affects the body, how insulin affects different cells in the body. And he tells you exactly why insulin is a storage hormone. It stores fat in your fat cells. It puts glucose in your muscles. It puts glucose into your glucose stores. That's what insulin does. It tries to get the glucose out of your blood. But remember, when you take insulin, it doesn't make glucose just disappear. That's not how it gets rid of it. It pushes it into your cell. It pushes it into the liver and tells the liver to turn it into fat in the form of triglycerides. Then it tells the cells to store that. Okay. That's what insulin does. So if you're taking glucose and then you take insulin, what you just did was made the perfect machine for putting fat into your fat cells. That's what you do. So if you're diabetic, you should not be eating glucose. You really probably shouldn't be eating carbs. If you're a diabetic, you could either stick to the vegetables that grow above the ground or just don't even eat those. It's up to you. Depends on how bad your diabetes is. But anytime you eat glucose, you're just making your situation worse. Anytime you eat a carbohydrate meal, you're going to be hungry about 3 hours later, 2 to 3 hours later. So eating carbs, if you just eat a big salad and that's all you're going to have, you're going to be starving to death later because there's no fat, basically. There's no protein, basically. There's no cholesterol. Very little vitamins, very minerals, a little bit of protein, not much. When you consider like a big steak, a big meat, you got all this protein, all this fat, all this cholesterol, all the vitamins, minerals, everything that the body needs. But so it's going to stimulate your hunger when you eat carbohydrates. It will not stimulate your hunger when you eat protein and fat. That's why the people who are selling all these drugs that make you feel full, they don't tell you to change your diet. They say, keep on eating all these carbohydrates because fat's going to make you fat. Keep eating these carbohydrates, okay, that are going to be turned into fat, and we'll keep giving you medication that keeps you hungry all the time. So you're going to be trying to eat, but you have medication that's trying to make it where you're not eating, and you're throwing your body into just mass confusion. So one, having glucose can make you hungry because when you eat a lot of glucose, a lot of insulin produced, and maybe it's more insulin than it needs, and it can drop your glucose levels down. And when you get hypoglycemic, that can stimulate hunger also. When you use fat for your energy source, you don't have to worry about hypoglycemia. Your body knows how to handle glucose. It just doesn't have to handle it constantly all throughout the day because it's using fat for its energy source. So you don't have to worry about hypoglycemia when you use fat for your energy source. Then also, you have things that your fat cells produce called leptin that also makes it feel where you're full. So when you fill up a fat cell, it produces leptin. Leptin goes up to medial hypothalamus, says, I'm not hungry anymore. When you continue to eat glucose for your energy source, you continue to make more and more fat cells or filling up more and more fat cells. you produce so much leptin that your medial hypothalamus ends up with leptin resistance. So it doesn't matter how much leptin's being produced, it still doesn't make you feel full anymore. So one of the big things that your body has, it doesn't work as far as keeping you feeling full. And they've also found that they think insulin also blocks leptin. So just the fact that you eat a glucose meal means you're blocking leptin, and it's not going to keep you feeling full. The other thing is, besides the leptin and the leptin resistance, then the other thing is, remember, when you eat glucose, it goes straight in the stomach, very quickly comes out of the stomach and in the intestine, then very quickly goes into your body. Blood glucose rises, insulin rises, and now you've changed your burning, and now you're just going to store fat. However, when you eat protein and fat, it does stay in your stomach for longer. It stays in the intestines longer. And as it stays in the intestine, it's constantly stimulating cytokinin, cholecystokinin, and peptide YY. These, just leptin, go up to the medial hypothalamus and say, I'm not hungry, quit eating. So if you just keep glucose out of your mouth, use fat for your energy source, you will not be hungry all the time. You're going to be fully nourished. You're going to keep your insulin levels down. You're going to be able to burn the fat out of your fat cells. And you can even burn the fat out from around your organs if you're already into diabetes. But this can be turned around, because remember, the only way you get glucose into your blood, the only way is through your storage, glucose storage. So when you're stressed out, fight or flight, that'll put glucose in your blood just for real quick, and then it's supposed to come down. The only other way you have a high blood glucose is because you're eating it. So if you stop eating it, your blood glucose will drop. It truly is that easy. You will not ever do this with medications, because medications work by stimulating insulin release or making cells more sensitive. So it actually makes the problem worse. Okay. I hope you understand that. When you eat fat, there are no adverse effects. Fat burns very clean. Fat fuels us for long, and we have plenty of energy on board, so we can go long periods of time without having to eat. I hope you understand the difference between glucose and fat, which one's healthier. Obviously, fat, that's the way God made us, and you have 100% choice over whether you use fat or glucose, and it all depends on what you put in your mouth. So until next time, stay nourished and stay well. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below, and be sure to tell someone else who may want to change their health path as well. And remember, if you would like to enroll in our new online Thrive Naturally Transformation course to help you reach your new improved health goal, to reverse type 2 diabetes, feel great, and get off medications, we are here to help. Just go to our website, drstevehewlett.com, and click on the Work With Us tab at the top of the page. We truly are here to help you get off medications and start living the vibrant, pain-free life that you would love to live.